Why Ilia Topuria will be a long reigning champion. Ilia Topuria recently defeated Alexander Volkanovski in impressive fashion at UFC 298. And after his incredible performance and after some of the other performances that he's shown, in my personal opinion, I think Ilia Topuria is going to be a long reigning champion at the featherweight division. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm Juicy MMA, I make opinionated MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. But anyways, let's get into it. Ever since arriving to the UFC, Ilia Topuria has been extremely impressive. Originally, when Ilia was joining the UFC, he was actually seen as more so of a grappler, due to the fact that he got a lot of submission victories prior to the UFC, and he was even getting a lot of his victories by utilizing his wrestling. But ever since making it to the UFC, Ilia did a phenomenal job at showing off the other aspect of his game, and that was his boxing. As when you look at some of the fights that Ilia had, he was able to get a lot of TKO finishes. For example, he was able to get a TKO finish over Ryan Hall, he was able to get a TKO finish over Jai Herbert, he was able to beat Josh Emmett via decision, but if any other fighter in the featherweight division was in there that night, Ilia probably would have been able to get a TKO, and obviously, as we all know at this point, he was able to TKO Alexander Volkanovski. So overall, when you look at Ilia's fights in the UFC so far, it's pretty clear that this guy is extremely versatile. Of course, as I mentioned, he has phenomenal boxing, he utilizes it very often, but even besides that, he does have the ability to take the fight to the ground and submit guys, as he was able to take Bryce Mitchell to the ground and submit him. And of course, Bryce is known for his ground game, so that's a very impressive victory for Topuria. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why was Ilia specifically able to be so successful in all of those fights that I mentioned? Well, in my opinion, I definitely think it comes down to a couple different factors, but I think the overall versatility is the main reason why. Because starting with Ilia's stand-up game, it's pretty clear that this guy is an extremely talented boxer out there. In terms of his offense, he's just elite. He does a great job at throwing out that jab at times, he does a great job at staying calm and patient and looking for those big shots, but when those opportunities do arise, Ilia is not afraid whatsoever to let his hands go, as he does a great job at letting his hands go and throwing those power shots in combination until eventually he lands a big shot in his opponent and eventually KOs them, as he was able to do to Jai Herbert in their fight, and he also was more recently able to do to Alexander Volkanovski in their fight. Now, besides his offensive boxing, I would say Ilia also has pretty good defensive boxing as well, as he moves his head pretty well, avoids a lot of those jabs, does a really nice job at utilizing his hands and his shoulders to block a lot of the punches that his opponents throw in, and overall, in terms of his boxing, both offensively and defensively, I would say Ilia Topuria is extremely talented and extremely elite. But besides just his boxing ability, Ilia also does a phenomenal job at throwing kicks. Although he doesn't utilize it all that often, in his most recent fight against Volkanovski, Ilia actually did a great job at utilizing those kicks and hurting Volkanovski's legs pretty early on. So although it isn't necessarily something that he utilizes all that often, I could see him go to it a little bit more as his career does progress. So overall, when you look at Topuria's stand-up ability, I think a couple things jump out to you. Of course, the power is just jarring. The way he was able to KO Volkanovski, the way he was able to KO Jai Herbert, the way he was able to KO a lot of different guys was just incredible to watch, and clearly the power is there for Topuria. But even besides that, I think the other thing that jumps out to me personally is how technical he is. Not only is this guy a power puncher, but of course, in order to get to a guy like Volkanovski or get to some of the other guys he was able to KO, you can't just throw wild shots out there. And Topuria has done a phenomenal job in every single one of his fights at staying extremely technical and throwing those power shots in combination, and that's really why he's become so dangerous. But besides his great striking ability, Ilia also has phenomenal wrestling, as when he wants to take the fight to the ground, he definitely can, as he was able to ragdoll a guy in Bryce Mitchell who's known for his ground game. And once the fight does get taken to the ground, Topuria goes right away to jiu-jitsu, as he was able to also submit Bryce Mitchell, and he was able to get a couple of other submissions throughout his MMA career so far. So overall, a huge reason for why I think Topuria has been so great and has been so successful has to be due to his overall versatility. Because a lot of people ask the question, why is Topuria able to just stay on the feet and utilize his great boxing? Why don't his opponents shoot on him and try to take him down? And in my opinion, the reason for why that is due to the fact that Topuria is so great everywhere. everywhere. Of course, he's going to be able to defend a lot of those takedowns, but even if he does get taken to the ground, I think Topuria is more than capable at either flipping the position, getting submissions, or just immediately getting right back up. And I think the overall versatility that Topuria has is the biggest reason for why he's able to keep the fight wherever he wants. If he wants to stay on the feet and trade with his opponent, he's able to do that. If he wants to take the fight to the ground and submit his opponent, he's able to do that. And I think that's the exact reason for why Ilia has become so dangerous, due to the fact that he's so great at basically everything out there. So another question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, why do I think Ilia Topuria is going to be a long reigning champion? Well, it comes down to what I just mentioned before, his versatility. I think no matter who Ilia ends up going up against, if it's Volkanovski again, if it's Movsar Ivilov, if it's Yair Rodriguez, if it's whoever else is possibly in the division in the future, Topuria is going to have a really good style in order to beat a lot of those different guys. If he needs to utilize his wrestling and utilize his ground game to beat a guy like Yair Rodriguez, he'll be able to do so. If he needs to utilize his boxing in order to beat some other guys, of course he'll be able to do so. Whatever he needs to do, he can do, and it seems like no matter who he goes up against, he's going to have somewhat of an advantage in one aspect of his game, whether that's a stand-up or whether that's his ground game. And the fact that he's so great at everything is definitely the main reason for why I think he's going to be a long reigning champ. Now, the next reason for why I think Topuria is going to be a long reigning champ is due to his finishing ability. When you look at his ability on the feet, obviously he definitely has the ability to knock people out, as he was able to knock out a bunch of guys. And when you look at the Volkanovski fight specifically, although Topuria did have a pretty good early round one, at the end of the day he did lose the first round. And when you're going up against a guy in Volkanovski and you start losing rounds, it becomes virtually impossible to beat this guy, because as the fight does go on, Volk does a great job at stepping on the gas, bringing up the pace, and start to fire those jabs at you and start to switch stances a lot and confuse his opponents and throw kicks to the legs. So I think the fact that Topuria has so much power and was able to finish Volkanovski in the second round is a real eraser. Of course, I do think Volkanovski is extremely skilled, and of course he did have the possibility of beating Volkanovski by decision, but I think due to the power that he does possess in that fight and any fight going forward, even if Topuria is losing in a certain moment of that fight, he can use that big right hand or that big eraser that he does have to erase all the mistakes that he made and erase all of the rounds that he lost and get finishes that way. But even besides his punching ability, the fact that once he goes to the ground, he also has a great submission game and great ability to finish the fight on the ground as well is another one of those erasers that he does possess. So overall, I think the fact that he has such great finishing ability no matter where the fight goes is also a huge reason for why I think Topuria is going to be a long reigning champ. But I guess only time will tell what does end up happening for Ilia Topuria. I do think he's going to have a lot of title defenses. I do think he's only going to get better with time. I think he's going to make improvements to his stand-up game. I think he's going to make improvements to his ground game, and eventually I think he's just going to be a guy who's extremely difficult to defeat. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Topuria is going to be a long reigning champ, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy it, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.